Okay, hearing none, Freddy, I'm going to turn it over to you for the program.
All right. Well, Doretta and I were just getting this together over the last few days, and we decided that this is probably the worst time for a realtor to give a presentation is June, because we've both been pretty swamped. But we have a little PowerPoint that there we go. And Doretta, do you want to start off with introductions?
Sure. So I'm Doretta Smith. I am the co-owner and managing broker at Martech Real Estate. Been in the business for about 17 years. Bob and I moved here from Salt Lake City about 9 years ago to fulfill our dream of living on the beautiful Oregon coast. Woohoo! And prior to being in real estate, we owned and managed software development companies. So that's a little bit about me and my background. And one thing you probably don't know about me, would never guess, is I worked for the Salt Lake Olympics for a year as the data administrator in the IT department. So that was a lot of fun and an experience I would repeat in a heartbeat. So Freddie, your turn.
All right. Well, I co-own and manage Advantage Real Estate here in Newport. Got my license back in 2008, and my principal broker's license probably just a couple years after that. Before that, I was in construction with my father for a number of years. We built a lot of custom homes here on the coast. We built a lot of Dietmar designs, so I had a chance to work with Dietmar quite a bit. And let's see, Doretta and I both have been president of the local association Board of Realtors. She was president a couple years ago, and I'm president this year, so that's kept me really busy. We have about 280, I think it is, members. So pretty big group and growing. Real estate has continued to be pretty busy even despite this COVID pandemic. It's definitely changed the way that we've done business, but people are still, buying and selling homes. So we've been fortunate in that respect. So let's see, why don't we go ahead and move on to the first slide here, and I'll let Doretta talk about this one.
Actually, we were going to talk on this one.
Oh, okay. So
we rehearsed this.
yeah, we had this all down pat, darn it. So one of the biggest issues is affordable housing, and it's become a real crisis here in Lincoln County. And from this chart, I think you can see that the disconnect between the median income and median home prices. This is a 10-year chart from 2010 to 2020. And in 2010, median household income was just $39,738. This is according to the census. And I think if Jim Graham were here, he'd probably tell us that that's as accurate as it gets. So in 2020, the median household income only rose 10% roughly to $43,300. So that's over 10 years. That's, I guess, roughly 1% per year, which is pretty, doesn't even really match the cost of living index, inflation and that sort of thing. So in 2010, the median home value in Lincoln County, and this is according to Zillow statistics, probably a little less accurate than the census, but that's what we've got to go with anyway. So 2010, the median home value was $202,000. And then 10 years later in 2020, today it's $311,000. So the median home value has basically increased 50% compared to just 10% of wages. So obviously there's a growing gap between wages and home prices. And there are a number of reasons for that. I think people coming in from other areas that have a little more money than our local workers is a big part of it. And then, median household income is, taking into account the minimum wage workers and just kind of lumping everyone into one pot. And we obviously do have some better jobs here at the coast. So it's not that nobody can afford homes, it's just that a lot of the locals, the average or median local, can't. So we get into that a little more on this next slide. So let's move to number 3 there. And Doretta, do you want to talk about this one?
So we took these statistics from Zillow. As you can see, at income of 43.3, the home that somebody could purchase for that at interest rates of 3.5% is about 180,000. Obviously, if interest rates inch up a little bit, for example, if they go to 5.5%, that would decrease down to 150,000. And Freddie and I can both tell you that about the only thing you're going to get is what you're going to see on the next slide. John, you want to go to the next slide? That one. So this is one of 5 that just closed. It's lovely. Go for it, Freddie.
Yeah, so inventory in this price range, the affordable price range, has been non-existent. And during the last 12 months, there were only 5 total properties that closed at 180,000 or less in Newport. So, you know, supply is a big issue. Also, what you get for that money. Most anything under 200,000 isn't really what you'd call habitable. And that's a problem too for financing, because a lot of the lower income buyers are using like USDA or FHA loans, and the condition requirements for those type of financing options are a lot stricter than conventional financing. So, you know, it not only has to be priced in their price range, but it has to meet the conditions of if it's an older home, it can't have peeling paint, it has to have a decent foundation, has to be free of mold and leaks. So there's quite a checklist, and really, you know, I think Doretta would agree that anything really under around 230 is pretty tough to finance these days, especially in Newport. Prices have varied over the, you know, county. Newport's a little more expensive than Walport and Toledo, for example, but still awfully hard to find anything really good for under around 250.
So we're having a hard time finding anything under 350. So anything 350 and less that is in decent shape, you've got multiple offers.
Yeah, this was a Fannie Mae foreclosure, and I think this is one of the 5 that just closed in the last year at 180 or less. This is probably one of 2 that were actually financeable. This was a foreclosure which sold for 165 just a couple months ago in April. So for every one of these, we probably have 20 buyers that are calling and asking about them. You know, it's like when we advertise on Zillow, we seem to get buyers that are looking for, you know, anything up to maybe 250, sometimes 300. Used to be, I'd say back around 2010, most of the workers in town with what you'd consider probably better than average jobs, like city employees or, you know, people that make over that median income, seemed like they would bring pre-qual letters from their lender for around 300,000 or maybe a little under. So that 300,000 and under price range is definitely way more buyers and way less inventory in that price range.
So that takes us to the next subject, which is one of the things that we get comments and questions about all the time is, if there weren't so many VRDs, wouldn't we have more affordable housing? And Freddie and I both, while there's always those 1 or 2, for the most part, the answer is no. I contacted one of my friends in the vacation rental business and asked, what's the top 10 items that a vacation renter wants? And as you can see, ocean fronts at the top, followed by hot tub, dog friendly, ocean view, night beach area, bayfront area, king size beds, toys, games, and puzzles. And then I thought the other 2 were kind of interesting. Good kitchen knives and good pots and pans. Anyway, so basically, you know, as you all know, Newport went in and changed the ordinance and created an overlay of where we can have vacation rentals. And the Memphis is down in the Nye Beach, Bayfront area, where it makes a little bit more sense for not only the community, but for vacation renters, because that's what they're looking for. The folks who have vacation rentals that are outside of that overlay are grandfathered in for about 5 years, and then they have to sell. Of the items up there is oceanfront. So John, if you go to the next slide. Oceanfront houses in Newport range in price from $569,000 to $1.125 million. As you can see, they are not what we would consider affordable. So having those houses as vacation rentals really doesn't take away from affordable housing. If you look at Ocean and Bay View houses in Newport, they ranged anywhere from $275,000 to $675,000. And I can tell you only 3 of those were at the $275,000 level in the last 12 months. And they weren't in the best condition either. I don't know that they would have been financeable. Median household income for Newport, this is a different, I took this off of a different statistic. It was data something. Anyway, it's close to the 43. It's 45,250. HUD defines an affordable dwelling as one that a household can obtain for 30% or less of its income. So that means that their principal, interest, tax, and insurance payment could be no more than $1,131.25. So even at current interest rates, which are about 3.25 today, buyers would not be able to borrow more than about $200,000. So we're down around that 180 to 200 level that we've talked about in the different slides. And so you can see that having vacation rentals for the most part doesn't take away from affordable housing, in our opinion. So you can see that Newport City is reporting that 61 of the current vacation rental dwellings in Newport are subject to that 5-year phase out. So we will be seeing quite a few of those come off the books over the next few years.
Yeah, it's really too bad Dean Sawyer wasn't here for this meeting because, you know, the city really gets a lot of its revenue from room tax. And with this COVID pandemic, you know, obviously that was down to begin with, but the more of these vacation rentals that become phased out mean less money for the city. And really someone's got to make that up. So if it's not vacationers that are contributing to the city funds, it's going to have to be the people that live here. You know, it's got to come from either them or us. And so I think that revenue is going to be down from this to begin with, but especially with less people traveling. And, you know, I think the horizon for affordable housing, one of the things that concerns me the most is that interest rates right now are really as low as they've ever been. And when we're talking about, you know, a buyer can afford $180,000 now, that's because of the low interest rates. And so if rates go up a few percent, which they're bound to in time, not only do those $180,000 buyers become $150,000 buyers, but it works the same in that 400,000 range and the 500,000 range. You know, suddenly they're able to spend 100,000 less than they can now too. So for the future of home values, I think the, you know, potential for interest rate increases is bound to have some effect down the road.
So do any of you have questions?
Looks like Diane has a question.
This was really, really interesting. Thank you. I guess the question I want to ask is, with the decrease in, you call them VRDs, we call them VRBOs, vacation rental by owner, but I think it's the same thing, vacation rental dwellings. Do you think our property taxes are going to go up? Because it's going to decrease and...
You gotta get it from
Well, that was
somewhere.
kind of my point. I think they're bound to. Yeah, we already have
but
high property taxes.
Can
Oh,
I
go
say
ahead, Matt.
I was going to say, you need to understand the property tax system. We have a rate-based system. You know, it's basically excuse me, we we have a rate-based system. So, you know, they're going to raise a certain amount of money off a certain amount of valuation. But then with Measure 50, there's also caps on that. So, you know, your local property taxes are capped at $15 a thousand. I mean, and then capital is outside of that, but basic operating taxes are capped at $15 a thousand.
You know, we need to research that more, because I was just told last night by, again, going back to Habitat, that Lucinda just researched and ours are $18 per thousand.
Right, because there's capital outside that $15 cap. So the hospital capital, the school capital, those bond measures that we voted for and came into place, those are outside the $15 cap.
So what we really need to do is get some of those bonds paid off before we put on any new ones.
Right, and that's, you know, that's oftentimes the timing is like the hospital bond, for example. There were a couple things that came off right at the time that was coming on, and so it offsets.
The thing that is interesting too is I'm doing a refinances for someone that has a house in Bend that the house is valued like at 600, and a house in Newport where it's valued like at 250. The Newport property taxes are almost $2,000 more than the Bend ones.
Yeah, it's a big turnoff in our industry. It's one of the reasons we saw so much activity in Toledo this last year or two, is because their property taxes are lower over there, and quite frankly, the workers just can't afford the payment when it includes our property taxes here in Newport, which is way too high.
Well,
So there's also the impact of there's assessed value, which is what you pay taxes on, and there's real market value, and those are not the same.
Right.
Under Oregon system, that assessed value can only go up 3% a year by law. So if the market is essentially inflating faster than that, your assessed value may be way below your actual real market value.
That's true, Matt, but we are starting to see some of those assessed values catch up to RMV.
Yeah, as RMV comes down and assessed values go or stabilize, don't increase as fast, then that 3% starts to close that gap.
And Julie, I would say that Bend is overvalued. So if they have owned their house for a while, they're probably not being taxed what it's worth, you know?
It's a newer house. New house.
Because it's pretty crazy what's going on over there. Like the values are crazy. Yeah.
Yeah. I just know, like Doretta and them are saying, because I do mortgages and refinances, that it's a killer when you're trying to make that principal, interest, taxes, and insurance fit within someone's budget for a normal working family, you know, because I mean, even the Habitat houses, we just had the duplexes, we had those appraised because we've got to make those payments affordable for those homeowners. And they're looking at, we were originally told $6,000 each unit. That has come down some. So it's a big dilemma. You know, it's, I know we've got to pay for services and we want to have a good community, but we've got to be able to afford it as well. So I don't know.
Yeah, like Matt mentioned, on older homes, you know, you can find some $300,000 homes that are only maybe $2,700 a year for property taxes, but you get into the new construction and they're hit harder right off the bat. So we had a $280,000 home sell out by the out in Agate Beach off of 71st, you know, in that Benton Street area. And I had some people pretty interested because the price of the home was around $300,000, but the annual taxes were $6,500. So, you know, you have to add almost $600 a month for property taxes, and that's pretty hard for, especially for someone that's earning $40,000 a year.
Yep.
So any other questions for Doretta, right?
I have one more question, if I could, please. There is a sign in, and I don't want to move. There is a sign on the bayfront that these condos are going to be, it's been up forever, condos, 5th Street condos or something like that. What's going on with, what are those and what's
You'll have
going
to
on
ask
with
Brody Beckstead.
Oh, okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
So I have a question that I don't quite know what the question is, and I'm sure you don't have an answer, but but it's something that's in my head.
We'll create something.
Okay, thank you. So you know, your presentation basically is telling us that that people who make, you know, an average income are not going to be able to afford to live here unless they're renting apartments, and there's you know, some more of those affordable apartments, but those I'm sure will be saturated quickly. Is there any sort of planning that is happening to help to reverse this, or to help to create more affordable homes so that people can buy homes at an affordable price? Is there any sort of effort underfoot?
I don't know of anything, Freddie. Do you? I think the problem comes in that you've got to have, you know, tracts of land available. You've got to have developers who can come in and make it pencil out. And I know the city's been trying to help with the CDCs, but or the SDCs, but the system development costs for a new build are still pretty hefty in this area.
System development cost, SDC.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Nursel, I know that Housing Authority has been looking at creative ways on how they can help with that, and there is a coalition that director's on, and I think Lola's on at Samaritan House, that they're trying to think of things that can be done. Because then what Housing Authority has shown over the years is the need has changed. It used to be, and their highest need they're getting requests for are for the 1 bedrooms. Now, not, you know, more for the worker with the 1 bedroom. And also it used to be, what they told me was that people that would need to be, you know, in low income housing, it would be just a stepping up. They'd get in and, you know, and out. And that's not happening anymore because the majority are elderly that are on a fixed income. They couldn't survive anywhere else, or disabled people on the fixed income. So that there does need to be discussion, because all these things have changed. So for lower income now, all I see is the rentals. You know, I don't see anything being more looked at for permanent, being able to buy. You know, and
I was on the city of Newport, and on that committee, we broke out a portion of the SDCs for a construction excise tax, which is actually in place right now. And the whole construction excise tax for new projects, commercial and residential, all that money goes to affordable housing projects. But it just happened a year ago, so there's not a lot of money in it yet. But that is something that's happening with the city, that the city's doing to try to incentivize. Well, I mean, they're getting funds for it. So what they do with those funds and how it actually comes to fruition will be interesting. But for every new project we have in the city, all of our clients pay a CET tax for affordable housing.
Right, but then that's used more, I'm thinking, for developers like the one in Agate Beach, to attract them to build big lower income rental units, correct?
Yeah, no, well, so I don't know. That's the interesting thing. One argument that I heard during the city meeting and is that they want to use the construction excise tax to help people pay off their SDCs as one avenue, which is sort of interesting. It's like taxing someone and then paying the city what they would otherwise be compensated for with those funds. But that was one idea. And then they were trying to do like down payment assistance programs And then there's also some zoning things that they were looking at, trying to incentivize like larger densities. The problem is, with the exception of the project to the north, there's just not enough developers that are doing it, I think.
Yeah. Well, when you have lots that are selling for 100,000 and it's taking $150 to $200 a square foot to build a new home, you know, it doesn't take long to do the math. And when you start adding $30,000, $40,000 in SDCs on top of all of that, it just prices the average person out of the market.
And that's true. I think that the project to the north, I think each unit was subsidized to the tune of like $130,000 per unit. Mm-hmm. Freddy, you may, and Doretta, you may know that number more accurately, but I think it was about $130,000 per unit in order to make it pencil out. So that's a hard pill to swallow for private developers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I was referring to home building for private homeowners.
And what about those tiny homes? Remember, there's sort of a big, you know, a lot of flurry around tiny homes, and that was going to be an option for, you know. So
the problem with tiny homes is they're really treated by the state of Oregon as a trailer. And Lincoln County has rules about placement of trailers. And so there's just a lot of areas where it's just not going to happen. There is a park that's been created down in Waldport that you'll find a bunch of tiny homes. But, you know, when you start having the cities and county ordinances take effect with setbacks and side yards and blah, 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 and you have to have a minimum square foot percentage of your home. And anyway, you start applying all those rules and it really kind of takes out a lot of the options for that. And you have to put them on some kind of a permanent foundation.
Yeah, maybe we'll see more of that, you know, as time goes on. But there are some good organizations out there like Habitat and Proud Ground. Matter of fact, I just had a listing sell that was subsidized by Proud Ground, so it'll be affordable housing in perpetuity. And the way that works is Proud Ground assumes ownership of the lot, and the homeowner buys just the house. And since Proud Ground owns the lot, they have some say in, you know, how much it can be sold for down the road. You know, it's always going to be sold at a discount to stay in affordable housing units. So things like that help, but it seems like it's kind of a drop in the bucket because there are just so many people that need housing and so few resources to address that.
And once again, it comes back to land availability. A lot of the land that's left is, you know, very topsy-turvy and as Dustin can probably attest to, takes a very creative architect and engineer to build on some of those lots that are left. Did we lose Dustin?
Well, yeah, no, I agree. One thing I think that's interesting that everyone should consider is in the city of Newport, you can put an accessory dwelling unit on every single family residence. So that's something that was probably like 2 years ago. I think the city approved it.
Yes.
And there's been very little interest in it. But if you think about it, the SDCs are significantly less for an accessory dwelling unit. You can put them on any single family lot as long as it's 6,000 square feet or larger. And I think if you can end up sharing some of those utility costs with low SDC fees, if that may be able to incentivize people to put these smaller units on each individual single family lot, which I think that's exciting. I think, you know, if you talk to we work with a lot of affordable housing developers and all of them talk about that quite a bit, that a door is a door. They don't care how that door is, but every single one unit that you get in town helps alleviate stress. And so a lot of them, they don't care if it's a mansion or if it's, you know, because people will move up. A lot of people are renting units that they could actually afford more, but there's more cost per month, but there's just not the inventory available. It's interesting.
Yeah, it's kind of sad that, you know, a lot of these people that can't qualify for a loan for, say, a $200,000 house where they'd pay $1,100 a month in principal and insurance and taxes, you know, those same people are paying $1,300 and $1,400 for rent. So they're actually paying more for rent than they would pay for a home if they could qualify. So as Julie knows, there's a lot of ratios and, they can't have more than 40% of their income as debt, or they don't qualify. So it's just harder to get a loan too these days.
Yeah, because what you're saying creates this vicious circle for them. They can never get out of that circle, So it is the best, there are some variances. I think VA if someone's been a veteran, that's a great deal now because no down payment and the ratios are a little higher than 40, can go a little higher. So it's a dilemma. Maybe Rotary should take it on to fix affordable housing.